Hello, welcome to today's Live at 5. Now, this morning there was a photo in another counselling group, and it had a picture of a counselling room with two lovely comfortable chairs and a table. You could see the window, bookshelves along one side. And the words that somebody captioned this photo was something along the lines of, "We can do so much with so little." We don't need a lot to be able to do our job, do we? We just need to turn up and be there and form the relationship. And that is very true in many ways. All we need to do is bring ourselves to the counselling space. But as I'm a disruptor, I left a comment which effectively said, if only it was that simple. Because especially if you're in private practice, there's so much that has to happen before the client arrives and sits down in your beautiful chair that you've chosen, in your lovely room that you've decorated, or, turns up on your online video call. There is so much that we have to do to get the client in the first place, isn't it? And usually we've had to invest considerable time. If you're working online, you've got to have decided what platform you're going to use for your video calls. If you're working in private practice, you've had to do your advertising. You've had to communicate with the client, probably by email. You've probably had to create a contract by using something like Google Docs or Microsoft Word. So you've got to know how to use those technological systems. You've got to have sorted out your payment and how people are going to pay you, because most of the time now, we don't actually ask clients to pay by cash on the day. We usually get them to pay beforehand. We've got to have sorted all that out as well. And many of us now have payment gateways as well. So there's an awful lot more than just getting the client into the room in front of us. There's so much that we have to do. And the problem is that tech can be a real barrier to that happening. We need it. We need tech to help us get that relationship established with the client in the first place. But for many of us, tech can actually be a real barrier to us getting started. So what I'm going to tell you about today is really getting over that technological barrier. I talk a bit more about it this week in my podcast in relation to social media, but also it's so much more than social media, isn't it? But I really believe that with some help, you can do it, however old you are, because I know that age can often feel like a barrier when it comes to tech. And however technically incompetent you feel, we can still do it. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. You may have seen that I made a real rookie error recently. My podcast sound had deteriorated to the point where it was actually really difficult to hear me on the raw recording. So I asked my daughter to help me out. And I thought it was going to take ages. I'd done all the checks, I'd done everything. It really wasn't obvious. So I thought, it's always obvious. It's one of those moments, So my daughter looked at it and she said, "You're using the wrong default microphone." And that's all it was. It literally took her minutes to just, as soon as she checked it, she said, "That's the problem." And it was a real rookie error. And you know what? You just sort of think, oh, I'm sure you can identify with that feeling of, oh, here we go again, something that was really simple and I couldn't do it, and you start castigating yourself. But the thing about that is actually really a sign of the fixed mindset. And what I'm doing when I'm sort of telling myself off and thinking I'm an idiot is I'm reinforcing to myself this fixed mindset that somehow, you've got to be born with this innate ability to tackle tech. And if you don't have it, well, you might as well just give up and go home because, you can't do it. Whereas a growth mindset actually helps us to be a lot kinder and compassionate towards ourselves and says, this is actually just a puzzle to solve. This might be difficult, but it isn't impossible. And with some help, I can actually get to the bottom of it. And I think that's remembering that growth mindset can really support us when we're struggling. I mean, back in the day, I was a librarian and I used to support other librarians in their use of computers. I was the expert. And I can hardly believe it nowadays. But the fact is I was in that position. It's because I learnt how to use the tech and I was then able to show other people how to use it. So it is a case of learning. But I think what I was thinking about when I was thinking about this live feed is that technology is developing all the time. So I think it's fairly unrealistic of ourselves to expect that we'll pick up a piece of technology and be able to use it straight away, because it isn't innate. It is something that's changing and developing over time, and we actually need to learn how to do it. So to expect ourselves to sort of sit down and be able to do it straight away or after a couple of goes is perhaps being a bit hard on ourselves and a bit unrealistic. And it's helpful to approach what we're doing with that growth mindset, which is this isn't impossible. It is possible to learn. It's not an innate problem with me. It's just a problem that I need to solve. And I've got all these resources that I can use to solve them. It's not impossible for me to work it out. And I think that's what you can tell yourself to help you when you are facing one of these tech barriers. So one of the things that can be really, really useful if you're in that place where you can't work it out is it is really helpful. Google and YouTube can be really helpful. So today, I've got a new member of Therapy Growth Group who joined today, and they got in touch and said, I can't get into the website. I'm coming up with this bad gateway error. And it's like, oh my goodness, what's wrong? What's wrong? Immediate panic. Isn't it working? Is the website down? When I calmed down, I had a looked on Google, what does a bad gateway error mean? And it just means that two ends weren't communicating. Best thing to do is clear cache. And there's a YouTube video that tells you how to do it. So often, if you're really stuck, the best thing to do is just Google it, check it out on YouTube. And Google's really good because it will give you the exact place on the YouTube video that you can watch to explain it. That's what I'm often doing. So you have got YouTube there as your friend. And also, the other thing that's really, really helpful is other people. And often what I'll find if I'm struggling with something is I'll say to my husband, who's very, very good with tech, could you come over here and just give me a hand? And he'll literally walk into the room and I'll say, it's all right, I fixed it. And computer programmers actually, I don't know if you've ever looked in a computer programmer's office, but quite often they will have a rubber duck and they say, talk to the duck, because often, you're sitting there and you're looking at it and you're looking at it and you're looking at it and you can't work out what the problem is. And you just need to talk about it to someone else, and telling somebody else, you quite often solve the problem while you're telling them. And that's a well-known thing with tech. So talk to the duck, get a little rubber duck, take out your tech barrier on the duck. I can't get this sorted. But the other thing that could be really helpful is to ask for help, obviously. And there's no shame. If you approach it with a growth mindset, there's no shame in asking. It's about getting the help that you need because you're learning how to do this. And if other people have already walked the path, they'll be happy to help you. We had this in Therapy Growth Group recently. One of the members said, I need to caption videos in LinkedIn, in Instagram, on Facebook. How do I do it? And there were three of us who said, I said, well, you can do it like this on Facebook. Somebody else said, do it like this on Instagram. And then, a fourth person came in and said, I use this app called CapCut, and that will do the captions for me. So, four of us put our heads together and came up with an answer for this person who didn't know how to do it. So that's how you can get help, is by asking other people. And as I say, do feel if you're in private practice, Therapy Growth Group is something that can really help you because there's lots of people there, lots of heads that we can get together and help you solve your tech problems. But I think the most important thing is to really get started. Try and break it down. If you're looking at a big project, like say creating a website, you want to break it down into the smaller constituent parts. Because if you say, oh, I've got to create a website, that's a really big thing to create. So you need to break it down into smaller parts. For example, you can break it down into separate pages. But as a overall project, it's like the separate parts of the project. So the beginning of the project might be research, for example, and then there might be, I've got to choose a host. So you go away and research host. You break it down into small things, and then you get started and you build up over time. And if you're doing something like social media, there's that consistency of practice. I'm so much better at using the Canva app now than I used to be, because I use it every day, and every day I learn something new about it, or I resolve how to do something, or go off to YouTube and look it up, for example. So, keep practicing, and very importantly, celebrate when you've achieved something. That's a really important thing to do as well. And the other thing that I think is really, really important is to keep the overall aim in mind. What's your goal? Why are you doing this? And let's wind back right to the front of this live feed, right back to the start. We talked about that photo of a counselling room with the 2 chairs and the table ready to receive the client. That's what you're doing it for. That's what it's about. That's what makes it worthwhile. So come back to that. Come back to your why. And remember, if you need any help, I'm here to help you. Can really help you if you're in Therapy Growth Group, or if you work with me one-to-one. That's what I do. That's my whole job. Also, listen to the podcast as well if you're looking for help with social media this week. Thanks very much for watching. I hope that's helped. Bye for now.